The auction platform stood in the blazing Nevada sun, and Thea Lawson knew her life had finally come to this desperate end as the auctioneer's voice droned on about her like she was livestock being sold at market. She stood there in her faded calico dress, her auburn hair pinned back as neatly as she could manage with trembling fingers that morning, and tried to keep her chin up even though she wanted to disappear into the dusty ground beneath her feet. Empire City, Nevada had seen plenty of bride auctions in the year 1882, but this one felt particularly cruel as the bids stayed low and the men in the crowd looked her over with either disinterest or something far worse in their eyes. "Do I hear $50? The auctioneer called out, his mustache twitching as he surveyed the sparse crowd gathered in the town square. $50 for this young woman, healthy and able-bodied, ready to be a wife to a good man? Thea's stomach twisted. She had arrived in Empire City 3 weeks ago on the orphan train from Boston, one of dozens of women and children shipped west with promises of new opportunities and fresh starts. But the promised position as a school teacher had fallen through when the town council decided they didn't need another teacher after all, and with no money, no family, and no way to return east, she had been forced into this humiliating situation. The alternative was starvation or worse, so here she stood, being auctioned off like a piece of furniture. $40 then, the auctioneer said, his voice taking on a desperate edge. Surely someone wants a wife for $40. A few men snickered in the crowd. Thea caught sight of a large man with tobacco-stained teeth grinning at her, and she felt bile rise in her throat. She had heard stories about what happened to auction brides who ended up with cruel men, and there was no law that would protect her once the transaction was complete. $30 done, the auctioneer said, and now his voice held a note of pity that made Thea's cheeks burn with shame. Gentlemen, this is a fine young woman. She can read and write. She's educated. She's $20, someone finally called out, and Thea's heart sank as she recognized the voice of the tobacco-chewing man. His name was Silas Beck, and she had seen him around town, always drunk, always leering at women who passed by his usual spot outside the saloon. $20? I have $20, why see? The auctioneer said quickly, clearly wanting to get this over with. Do I hear 25? Silence stretched across the square. Thea felt tears prickling at her eyes but refused to let them fall. She would not give these people the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She had survived losing her parents to typhoid fever when she was 16, had survived 4 years working in a textile mill in Boston under brutal conditions, had survived the long journey west in a cramped train car. She would survive this too somehow. Going once, the auctioneer said. Thea looked out at the crowd and tried to prepare herself for whatever life awaited her with Silas Beck. Maybe she could run away once they were married. Maybe she could find a way to $53. The voice came from the back of the crowd, deep and steady. Every head turned, including Thea's. A tall man pushed his way through the gathering, his hat worn and dusty, his clothes speaking of long days working cattle under the Nevada sun. He couldn't have been more than 25 or 26 with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that needed cutting. His jaw was set in a determined line, and his brown eyes met Thea's for just a moment before he turned to face the auctioneer. $53, he repeated. That's everything I have. The auctioneer's eyebrows shot up. $53. We have $53 from. He paused, waiting for the man to identify himself. Owen Mallory was, the cowboy said. I work at the Double R Ranch, 5 miles outside town. Silas Beck spat in the dirt. $54, murderers, he said with a nasty grin. Owen Mallory's expression didn't change. I told you 53 is everything I have. Every cent I've saved for the last 2 years working cattle. He turned to look directly at Silas. But if you want to outbid me, go ahead. I hear your credit's no good anywhere in town, so you'll need cash money. A few men in the crowd chuckled. Silas's face turned red, and he took a step forward, his hands balling into fists. You calling me broke, Mallory? I'm saying put up or shut up, Owen replied calmly. You got $54 in your pocket right now? Silas's mouth worked for a moment, but no sound came out. Everyone in town knew he spent every penny he got on whiskey and gambling. He shot a venomous look at Owen, then at Thea, and finally stormed off, pushing his way roughly through the crowd. $53 going once, the auctioneer called out, sounding relieved. Going twice, sold to Owen Mallory. The world seemed to tilt slightly under Thea's feet. She watched as Owen walked up to the platform and counted out his money into the auctioneer's hand. Bills and coins carefully saved, now handed over for her. The auctioneer counted it twice, nodded, and then gestured for Thea to step down. She's all yours, Mallory. The reverend's waiting inside the church to make it legal. Thea's legs felt wooden as she descended the platform steps. Owen stood there waiting, his hat now in his hands, and up close she could see he had kind eyes despite the hard set of his jaw. He was taller than she had realized, probably 6 feet or more, with broad shoulders and calloused hands that spoke of honest work. "Miss," he said quietly, "I'm Owen. I know this isn't how anyone wants to start things, but I promise you I'm not like Beck. I won't hurt you." Thea found her voice, though it came out smaller than she would have liked. "I'm Thea Lawson, and thank you. I don't know what would have happened if—" "Don't think about it," Owen said firmly. "Come on, let's get this done so we can head out to the ranch. I borrowed a wagon for the day." They walked across the square to the small white church, and Thea felt the eyes of the town following them. She wondered what they were thinking, wondered what they saw when they looked at her. A desperate woman. A commodity bought and sold. She pushed the thoughts away and focused on putting one foot in front of the other. The Reverend was waiting inside, a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles who had clearly performed this ceremony many times before. He didn't waste time with pleasantries, just opened his book and began reading the marriage vows in a monotone voice that suggested he wanted this over with as quickly as possible. "Do you, Owen Mallory, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," Owen said. "Do you, Thea Lawson, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Thea hesitated for just a moment. This man was a complete stranger. She knew nothing about him except that he had spent everything he owned to save her from Silas Beck. Was that enough? Did she have a choice? She looked at Owen's profile, saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw muscles worked as he waited for her answer. He had spent 2 years of savings on her. The least she could do was say, "Yes, I do." "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Nevada, I pronounce you husband and wife. Sign here." They signed the register, Thea's hand shaking slightly as she wrote her name, soon to be changed. Mrs. Owen Mallory. It felt surreal. An hour ago she'd been standing on an auction platform waiting to be sold, and now she was married to a cowboy she had never spoken to before today. Owen paid the Reverend $1 for his services, and they walked back out into the bright sunlight. The wagon was waiting across the street, a sturdy farm wagon pulled by 2 brown horses. Owen helped Thea up onto the seat, his hand steady and impersonal on her elbow, and then climbed up beside her. "You have any belongings?" he asked as he picked up the reins. "Just a carpetbag at the boarding house, room 6. They drove to the boarding house in silence, and Owen waited while Thea went inside to collect her meager possessions. Everything she owned in the world fit into one small carpetbag. 2 changes of clothes, a hairbrush, a book of poetry her mother had given her, and a small tin containing her mother's wedding ring. She had planned to sell the ring if things got desperate enough, but now perhaps she wouldn't have to. She came back outside to find Owen watering the horses at the trough. He looked up when he heard her footsteps and took the carpetbag from her hands, stowing it in the back of the wagon with surprising gentleness. "Ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be." They headed out of town, and Thea watched Empire City shrink behind them as the wagon rolled along the dusty road. The Nevada landscape stretched out in all directions, vast and brown and dotted with sagebrush. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still holding snow despite the summer heat. It was beautiful, in a harsh, unforgiving way that matched exactly how Thea felt about her life at this moment. The Double R Ranch belongs to a man named Richard Rowe, Owen said, after they had been traveling for about 10 minutes. His voice broke the silence suddenly, and Thea turned to look at him. I've worked there for 3 years now. Started as a ranch hand, worked my way up to foreman about 6 months ago. It's a good spread, runs about 500 head of cattle. That's good, Thea said, not knowing what else to say. I have a cabin on the property. It's not much, just 2 rooms, but it's sturdy, and it keeps the weather out. I built it myself when I got promoted to foreman. He glanced at her. I'm telling you all this so you know what you're getting into. It's not a fancy life. The work is hard, and sometimes the money's tight, but I'm good at what I do, and Mr. Rowe pays fair. I'm not afraid of hard work, Thea said quietly. I worked in a textile mill for 4 years before I came west. 12-hour days, 6 days a week. I know what hard work is. Owen nodded slowly, something like respect flickering across his face. That's good to know. I was worried you might be one of those city girls who expects everything handed to her on a silver platter. If I was that kind of girl, I wouldn't have ended up on an auction platform, Thea said, and there was more bitterness in her voice than she intended. No, I suppose not. Owen was quiet for a moment, then said, For what it's worth, I'm sorry that happened to you. It's not right selling women like that, but the territory doesn't have many laws protecting folks yet, and some people take advantage. Why did you bid on me? Thea asked suddenly. The question had been burning in her mind since he had stepped forward in the crowd. You don't know me. You spent everything you had. Why? Owen's hands tightened on the reins, and he stared straight ahead at the road. I've been saving up to buy some land of my own, he said finally. There's 160 acres south of here that's going to be available next spring. I've had my eye on it for 2 years, working and saving every penny I could spare. I was almost there, almost had enough for the down payment. He paused, and Thea waited, sensing there was more to the story. But when I rode into town this morning and saw that auction happening, saw you standing up there looking so... He stopped, seeming to search for the right words. You looked scared but proud at the same time, like you were trying not to break. And when I heard the bid staying so low, heard Beck making his offer, I couldn't walk away. I've seen what happens to women who end up with men like him. My own mother married a man like that after my father died, and he made her life hell until the day she passed. Thea felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. So you saved me out of pity? No, Owen said firmly, turning to look at her for the first time since they had left town. I saved you because it was the right thing to do. There's a difference. I don't pity you, Thea. I respect you for standing up there and keeping your dignity when most people would have fallen apart. They looked at each other for a long moment, and Thea saw only honesty in his brown eyes. Whatever else Owen Mallory might be, he wasn't a liar. Thank you, she said softly. I know that doesn't seem like enough, but thank you. You gave up your dream for me. Dreams can wait, Owen said, turning back to the road. And besides, who knows? Maybe we can build something together. You're my wife now, for better or worse. Might as well make the best of it. The Double R Ranch came into view about an hour after they left town. It was a sprawling operation with a large main house, several barns and outbuildings, and corrals filled with horses and cattle. Ranch hands moved about doing their various tasks, and a few of them looked up curiously as Owen drove the wagon past. That's the main house where Mr. Rowe lives with his family, Owen said, pointing to the large wooden structure. His wife Martha is a good woman. She'll probably want to meet you soon. The bunkhouse is over there where the single ranch hands sleep, and that... He guided the wagon toward a small cabin set slightly apart from the other buildings. That's home. The cabin was simple but well built, with a stone chimney and real glass windows, a small porch wrapped around the front, and Thea could see a vegetable garden plot beside the house, currently overgrown with weeds. Owen pulled the wagon to a stop and jumped down, then came around to help Thea descend. His hands on her waist were brief and professional, and he released her the moment her feet touched the ground. Come on, I'll show you around. The inside of the cabin was sparse but clean. The main room held a table with 4 chairs, a wood stove for cooking, some shelves with supplies, and a rocking chair by the fireplace. Through an open doorway, Thea could see a bedroom with a single bed covered by a simple quilt. "I know it's not much," Owen said, watching her take it all in. "I wasn't exactly expecting to bring a wife home today, so I haven't had time to make things more comfortable." "It's fine," Thea said, and she meant it. After sleeping in a cramped boarding house room for 3 weeks, and before that in crowded mill housing, having a whole cabin felt almost luxurious. "It's more than fine." Owen looked relieved. "I'll bring in some more water from the well. Get a fire going so you can cook if you're hungry. I've got some supplies: flour, beans, bacon, coffee. Not fancy, but it fills the stomach." "I can cook," Thea said. "Nothing fancy either, but I can make a decent meal out of simple ingredients." They worked in awkward silence for the next hour. Owen brought in firewood and water while Thea explored the kitchen supplies and figured out what she had to work with. She found a slab of bacon, some beans that needed soaking, flour, and a precious few eggs that must have come from chickens somewhere on the ranch. She decided to make biscuits and bacon for their supper, something simple but filling. As the sun began to set and the cabin filled with the smell of cooking food, Owen sat at the table and watched her move around the kitchen. Thea was acutely aware of his presence, this stranger who was now her husband. She didn't know what he expected from her, didn't know what would happen when night fell and it was time to sleep. "We should talk," Owen said, as if reading her thoughts, "about expectations and such." Thea turned from the stove, wooden spoon in hand. "All right?" Owen leaned back in his chair, his face serious. "I know this is an unusual situation. We don't know each other, and you didn't exactly have a choice about marrying me. I want you to know that I'm not going to force anything. The bedroom is yours. I'll sleep out here on the floor until we figure things out." Thea felt a rush of relief so strong it almost made her dizzy. "Thank you. I appreciate that. I expect you'll keep the house, do the cooking and cleaning, tend the garden if you're willing. I'll provide for you, make sure you have what you need. Beyond that," he shrugged, "we'll figure it out as we go, I suppose. I've never been married before, so I'm making this up as I go along." "That makes 2 of us," Thea said with a small smile. It was the first time she had smiled since arriving in Empire City, and Owen's expression softened when he saw it. "You have a nice smile," he said, then looked away quickly as if embarrassed by the observation. "What I mean is, I hope you'll have reason to smile more often. I know today was probably one of the worst days of your life, but I'll do my best to make sure the rest aren't so bad." They ate their simple supper in more comfortable silence, and afterward Owen showed Thea where everything was stored, explained the routine of ranch life, and answered her questions about the surrounding area. He was patient and thorough, and Thea found herself relaxing slightly around him. As darkness fell, Owen made himself a bed on the floor using some blankets and his saddle as a pillow. Thea retreated to the bedroom and changed into her nightgown, her fingers trembling slightly as she brushed out her long auburn hair. Through the thin wall, she could hear Owen moving around, banking the fire, checking the door locks. She lay in the bed, staring up at the dark ceiling, and wondered what her life would have been like if the teaching position had worked out. Would she have been happy in Empire City, molding young minds and building a respectable life? Instead, she was married to a cowboy she had known for less than 12 hours, sleeping alone in his bed while he made do with the hard floor. But he had saved her. That fact kept circling back through her mind. He had given up everything he had been working toward for 2 years to save her from a fate she couldn't bear to think about. That had to mean something about his character, didn't it? Sleep was a long time coming, but eventually exhaustion claimed her. The sound of roosters crowing woke Thea before dawn. She lay in bed for a moment, disoriented, before remembering where she was. She could hear Owen already up and moving around in the main room. She dressed quickly in her work dress and came out to find him pulling on his boots. "Morning," he said. "I need to get out to the herd. There's coffee on the stove, and help yourself to whatever food you need for breakfast. I'll be back around noon for dinner." "All right," Thea said, still foggy with sleep. "What would you like me to make?" Owen paused at the door, his hand on the frame. "Whatever you want is fine. I'm not particular." Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Thea poured herself a cup of strong black coffee and sat at the table, looking around the cabin in the gray morning light. This was her life now. This cabin, this ranch, this man she barely knew. She could either spend her time feeling sorry for herself, or she could make the best of the situation. She thought about what Owen had said the day before about making the best of things, and she decided he was right. She spent the morning cleaning the cabin from top to bottom, scrubbing floors and washing dishes and organizing shelves. The work was familiar and soothing, giving her hands something to do while her mind processed everything that had happened. In the afternoon, she tackled the overgrown garden, pulling weeds and trying to salvage what vegetables she could find. There were tomatoes, green beans, and some squash that had survived the neglect. When Owen returned at noon, he stopped in his tracks at the sight of her kneeling in the garden, her dress dirty and her face flushed with exertion. "You didn't have to do all that," he said, but he was smiling. "I wanted to," Thea said, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand. "Besides, it seems a shame to let good vegetables go to waste. This garden could produce a lot with some attention." "My mother used to keep a garden," Owen said softly. "I planted this one thinking I'd maintain it, but I never seem to have the time. Would you want to take it over?" "I'd like that," Thea said, surprised by how much she meant it. Having a project, something that was hers to tend and care for, felt like a gift. They settled into a routine over the next few weeks. Owen would leave before dawn to work with the cattle, riding out with the other ranch hands to move herds, mend fences, break horses, and handle the endless tasks that came with running a large ranch. Thea would spend her days keeping the cabin, tending the garden, and learning the rhythms of ranch life. Martha Rowe, the ranch owner's wife, came to visit 3 days after Thea arrived. She was a plump, kind-hearted woman in her 50s with graying hair and laugh lines around her eyes. "I heard Owen got himself married," Martha said, settling into the rocking chair with a cup of tea. "Caused quite a stir around here. Owen's always been such a quiet, solitary type. None of us expected him to bring home a bride." Thea didn't know what to say to that, so she just smiled and offered Martha some of the cookies she had baked that morning. "These are delicious," Martha said after taking a bite. "You're a good cook. Owen's a lucky man." She studied Thea with shrewd but kind eyes. "I won't pry into your business, dear, but if you ever need anything, female wisdom, or just someone to talk to, my door is always open. Ranch life can be lonely for women, especially if you're not used to it." "Thank you," Thea said, feeling genuinely grateful. "That means a lot." Martha visited regularly after that, and Thea found herself looking forward to those afternoons of female companionship. Martha taught her how to churn butter, how to preserve vegetables for winter, how to make soap from lye and animal fat. She shared gossip about the other ranch families and gave Thea a sense of being part of a community. The relationship between Thea and Owen developed slowly, carefully, like two wild animals circling each other. They were polite and respectful, learning each other's habits and preferences. Owen continued to sleep on the floor, never pushing for more, and Thea found herself increasingly curious about this man who had become her husband. She learned that he was patient and steady, never raising his voice even when he came home exhausted and sore from a long day's work. She learned that he had a dry sense of humor that would catch her off guard, making her laugh when she least expected it. She learned that he was respected by the other ranch hands who often came to him for advice or help with problems. And Owen learned about Thea as well. He learned that she was stronger than she looked, both physically and mentally. He learned that she had a sharp mind and read voraciously, devouring the few books he had in the cabin and borrowing more from Martha. He learned that she hummed while she worked, old songs from her childhood that filled the cabin with something that felt dangerously close to warmth. One evening, about 6 weeks after their marriage, Owen came home to find Thea sitting on the porch watching the sunset. He sat down beside her without a word, and they watched the sky turn orange and pink and purple in comfortable silence. "I've been thinking," Thea said finally, "about that land you wanted to buy, the 160 acres. Owen tensed slightly. "What about it? How much more money would you need? For the down payment?" "About $40, Owen said quietly. "But don't worry about it. That's not your concern." "It is my concern," Thea said, turning to look at him. "You're my husband. Your dreams are my dreams now. That's how marriage is supposed to work, isn't it?" Owen met her eyes, and in the fading light she could see something like hope flickering in his expression. "I suppose so, but I gave up that money to marry you, Thea. I don't regret it." "I know you don't," she said softly, "but I think we could save it back. If we're both careful, both working toward the same goal. I could take in sewing. Maybe." Martha mentioned that the ranch hands are always needing shirts mended and buttons replaced. "I could charge a small fee. And the garden is producing more than we can eat. We could sell the extra vegetables in town." Owen was quiet for a long moment. "You do that? Help me save for land?" "We're partners, aren't we?" Thea said. "You saved me. Let me help save your dream." Something shifted between them in that moment, something subtle but significant. Owen reached out and took Thea's hand. The first time he had voluntarily touched her since their wedding day. His hand was rough and calloused but warm, and Thea found she didn't want to pull away. "Thank you," Owen said, his voice rough with emotion. "That means more than you know." They sat there holding hands and watching the stars come out, and Thea felt something unfurling in her chest that she hadn't expected to feel. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of love. The foundation of something real that could be built between two people who had started with nothing but necessity and were finding their way towards something more. The summer gave way to fall, and the work on the ranch intensified as they prepared for winter. Owen worked long days helping to move cattle to lower pastures, and Thea threw herself into preserving food, sewing for the ranch hands, and saving every penny they could spare. They grew closer during those months, slowly bridging the distance between them. Owen began sharing more about his past, about growing up in Texas, about watching his father die in a stampede when he was 12, about his mother's difficult second marriage, and her death from pneumonia when Owen was 17. Thea shared her own stories in return, about her happy childhood in Boston before her parents died, about the brutal years in the textile mill, about the hope she had felt coming west, and the crushing disappointment when that hope evaporated. "We've both been through a lot," Owen said one night as they sat by the fire. He had finally given up sleeping on the floor and had built a second bed in the main room, saying his back couldn't take the hard ground anymore. "But maybe that means we're strong enough to build something good together." "Maybe," Thea agreed, and she realized she was starting to believe it. The first snow came in late October, dusting the Nevada mountains with white. Owen came home that evening with news. "Mr. Rowe wants to throw a dance for all the ranch families," he said as Thea ladled stew into his bowl. "It'll be in the main barn, week from Saturday. He does it every year before the weather gets too bad. There'll be music and food and dancing." He paused. "Would you want to go? With me?" Thea felt a flutter in her chest. "As in you're asking me on a date?" Owen's ears turned red. "I guess I am. I know we're already married, but we never really courted or anything. Thought maybe we could start doing things proper, even if it's backward." A smile spread across Thea's face. "I'd love to go to the dance with you, Owen." The week leading up to the dance, Thea found herself unexpectedly nervous. She had one nice dress, a green cotton dress that she had brought from Boston, and she washed and pressed it carefully. Martha came by to help her fix her hair, pinning the auburn curls up in an elegant style that made Thea feel almost beautiful. "Owen's not going to know what hit him," Martha said with a satisfied smile. "That boy's been halfway in love with you for weeks now, whether he knows it or not." "You think so?" Thea asked, her heart beating faster. "I know so," Martha said. "I've seen the way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching, like you're the sunrise after a long night." When Owen saw Thea in her green dress with her hair done up, he stopped dead in his tracks. He was wearing his best clothes, a clean shirt and vest and pants that didn't have holes in the knees, and he held his hat in his hands. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You clean up pretty well yourself," Thea said, feeling her cheeks warm. They walked to the main barn together as the sun was setting. Music was already drifting from the open doors, someone playing a fiddle while others clapped along. Inside, the barn had been transformed with lanterns hanging from the rafters and hay bales pushed to the sides to create a dance floor. Ranch families milled about, talking and laughing, and children ran between the adults playing tag. Owen introduced Thea to people she hadn't met yet, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back in a possessive gesture that made her pulse quicken. She met other ranch hands and their wives, farmers from neighboring properties, and even the sheriff from Empire City who had ridden out for the party. When the band struck up a waltz, Owen turned to Thea and offered his hand. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Mallory?" It was the first time he had called her that, and Thea felt something warm bloom in her chest. "You may, Mr. Mallory." Owen led her onto the dance floor, and Thea was surprised to discover he was a good dancer. He moved with the same quiet confidence he brought to everything else, his hand firm on her waist, his steps sure and steady. "Where did you learn to dance?" she asked as he spun her. "My mother taught me," he said. "She said every man should know how to dance because someday he'd have a wife who'd want to, and he shouldn't disappoint her." "She sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was," Owen said softly. "I think she would have liked you." They danced several more dances and then took a break to get some of the food laid out on long tables. Thea found herself laughing more than she had in years, surrounded by friendly people, with Owen's presence steady and warm beside her. Later in the evening, as they stood outside the barn cooling off from the dancing, Owen turned to her with a serious expression. "Thea, I need to tell you something." Her heart stuttered. "What is it?" "I know we started this marriage as a business arrangement, more or less, but somewhere along the way, it stopped being just that for me." He took her hands in his brown eyes intense. "I'm falling in love with you. Maybe I've been falling since that first day when I saw you on that platform so brave and proud. I don't expect you to feel the same way, not yet, but I wanted you to know." Thea felt tears pricking at her eyes, but they were good tears this time. "Oh, Owen, I'm falling in love with you too. I didn't expect it, didn't think it was possible. But every day I see the kind of man you are, and I can't help it." Owen's face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen from him. "Really?" "Really," she said, laughing through her tears. "You're a good man, Owen Mallory, the best man I've ever known." He pulled her close then, wrapping his arms around her, and Thea rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. They stood there for a long moment, just holding each other under the Nevada stars, and Thea felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was where she was meant to be. This was home. "Can I kiss you?" Owen asked softly. "Please," Thea whispered. He cupped her face in his hands, gentle despite their roughness, and lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was sweet and tender, full of promise and hope and all the things they were building together. When they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling. "I love you," Owen said. "I love you too," Thea replied, and meant it with her whole heart. That night, when they returned to the cabin, Owen didn't retreat to his bed in the main room. He followed Thea into the bedroom, and she reached for his hand, pulling him close. Their lovemaking was gentle and unhurried, a discovery of each other that felt sacred in its tenderness. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Thea felt a contentment she had never known before. "We should get a bigger bed," Owen murmured against her hair. "We should," Thea agreed, laughing softly. The winter that followed was the happiest time of Thea's life. The work was hard, with snow piling deep and temperatures dropping below freezing, but she faced it with Owen at her side. They spent long evenings by the fire, Thea reading aloud from books while Owen whittled or worked on tack repairs. They made love with increasing confidence and passion, learning each other's bodies and desires. They planned and dreamed about the future, about the land they would buy together, about the life they would build. By February, they had saved $30 of the $40 they needed for the down payment on the land. Thea's sewing business had taken off, with ranch hands and even people in town bringing her their mending. Owen had taken on extra work breaking horses, dangerous but lucrative. One snowy evening, Martha Rowe came to visit with surprising news. "Richard and I have been talking," she said, settling into the rocking chair that had become her customary seat. "We're getting older, and we need someone we can trust to eventually take over the ranch. Richard thinks Owen is that man." Thea and Owen exchanged shocked glances. "What exactly are you saying?" Owen asked carefully. "We want to make you a partner in the Double R," Martha said. "Not right away, of course, but over the next 10 years, you'd buy in gradually, and when Richard and I retire, the ranch would be yours. We'd have papers drawn up legal and everything." Owen sat down heavily in his chair. "Martha, I don't have the kind of money to buy into a ranch this size." "We know that," Martha said kindly. "That's why we'd structure it so you could work off your share. You're already the foreman, already doing half the management work. This would just make it official and give you a stake in the operation." Thea reached over and took Owen's hand, squeezing it tight. This was so much bigger than the 160 acres they had been saving for. This was a chance at real prosperity, real security. "I need to think about it," Owen said finally. "Talk it over with Thea. This is a big decision." "Of course," Martha said. "See, take your time, but know that Richard and I trust you, Owen. We think you and Thea are exactly the kind of people who should be running this ranch." After Martha left, Owen and Thea sat in silence for a long time, both trying to process what had just happened. "What do you think?" Owen asked finally. "I think it's an incredible opportunity," Thea said slowly. "But what about your dream of owning your own land, of starting from scratch and building something that's completely yours?" Owen pulled her into his lap, wrapping his arms around her. "My dream was about having something I could be proud of, something I built with my own hands. But this ranch, partnering with the Rose, that would still be my work, our work. And it's bigger than anything I could have built alone." "So you want to do it?" "I think I do," Owen said. "But only if you want it too. We're partners now, Thea. We make these decisions together." Thea kissed him, long and deep. "Then let's do it. Let's build our future here." Owen accepted the Rose offer, and over the next year, his role on the ranch expanded. He took on more management duties, made decisions about cattle purchases and sales, and began to understand the business side of ranching. Thea supported him in every way she could, taking on more of the domestic work so he could focus on the ranch, offering advice when he asked for it, and being his partner in the truest sense of the word. In the spring of 1883, Thea discovered she was pregnant. She told Owen on a warm April evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "I have news," she said, her heart pounding with a mixture of joy and nervousness. Owen looked at her, and something in her expression must have given it away because his eyes widened. "Are you—" "I'm pregnant," she confirmed, and then laughed as Owen let out a whoop of joy and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around. "We're going to be parents," he said, his voice full of wonder. "Thea, we're going to have a baby." "We are," she said, cupping his face in her hands. "Are you happy?" "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," Owen said, kissing her soundly. "I'm the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Martha was a godsend, helping Thea prepare for the baby and sharing her own experiences as a mother. Owen became even more protective and attentive, constantly asking if Thea needed anything, if she was feeling well, if she was comfortable. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," Thea would tease him, but she loved his attention all the same. Their son was born in December of 1883, arriving during a snowstorm with Martha serving as midwife. Owen paced in the main room while Thea labored in the bedroom, and when he finally heard the baby's first cry, he burst through the door with tears streaming down his face. "It's a boy," Martha announced, wrapping the infant in a clean blanket. "A healthy, strong boy." Owen approached the bed where Thea lay exhausted but radiant, and looked down at his son for the first time. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was already wailing with impressive lung power. "He's perfect," Owen whispered. "Thea, he's perfect." "Do you want to hold him?" Thea asked. Owen took the baby with trembling hands, cradling him against his chest with surprising gentleness for such a large man. The baby immediately quieted, seeming to sense his father's presence. "Hello there, little one," Owen murmured. "I'm your papa. I'm going to teach you everything I know, and I'm going to love you every single day of your life." Thea felt tears sliding down her cheeks as she watched her husband with their son. 2 years ago, she had been standing on an auction platform believing her life was over. Now she was lying in a warm bed, watching the man she loved hold their child, and she knew that sometimes the worst moments could lead to the most beautiful outcomes. They named the baby Matthew after Owen's father. Matthew was a good baby, healthy and happy, and Owen was a devoted father from the start. He would come home from long days working the ranch and immediately reach for his son, walking him around the cabin and talking to him about cattle and horses and the Nevada sky. Life settled into a new rhythm with a baby in the house. Thea managed motherhood and keeping the household running, while Owen continued building his partnership with the Rose. They were tired, constantly busy, and had very little money to spare, but they were happy. Deeply, completely happy. When Matthew was 6 months old, the Rose called Owen and Thea to the main house for a meeting. Richard Rowe, a tall, weathered man in his 60s, sat at his desk with papers spread before him. "Martha and I have been reviewing the ranch finances," he said, "and we're pleased with how things are going under your management, Owen. So pleased, in fact, that we want to accelerate our original timeline." "What do you mean?" Owen asked. "We want to transfer 50% ownership to you now instead of waiting 10 years, Richard said. "You'd own half the ranch outright. Martha and I would retain the other half until we pass, at which point it would go to you and Thea with a provision for our children to receive a fair financial settlement." Owen looked stunned. "Richard, I can't afford to buy 50% of this ranch. The value is—" "We're not asking you to buy it," Martha interrupted gently. "We're giving it to you. Consider it payment for everything you've done, and an investment in the ranch's future. You and Thea have become like family to us. Our own children move back east and have no interest in ranching. We'd rather see the Double R go to someone who loves this land and will care for it properly." Thea reached over and gripped Owen's hand tightly. This was more than they had ever dreamed of. This was security, prosperity, a legacy to pass on to Matthew and any other children they might have. "I don't know what to say," Owen said, his voice thick with emotion. "Say yes," Richard said with a smile, "and sign these papers." Owen looked at Thea, and she nodded, her own eyes bright with tears. "Say yes." "Yes," Owen said. "Thank you, both of you. I'll spend the rest of my life proving I deserve this trust." The papers were signed, witnessed by the sheriff who had been called out for the occasion, and just like that, Owen and Thea became half owners of the Double R Ranch. They walked back to their cabin in a daze, with Matthew sleeping peacefully in Thea's arms. "Can you believe it?" Owen asked, his voice full of wonder. "We own half of one of the most successful ranches in Nevada." "2 years ago, I was being sold at an auction," Thea said softly. "And you were just a cowboy with a dream and $53. Look at us now." Owen stopped walking and pulled her close, careful not to disturb the sleeping baby between them. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Thea Mallory. I spent $53 and got everything." "I think we both got everything," Thea said, tilting her face up for a kiss. "We got each other. We got Matthew. We got a future that's brighter than either of us could have imagined alone." "I love you," Owen said against her lips. "I love you too," she whispered back, now and always. The years that followed were full and rich. The Double R prospered under Owen's management, growing from 500 head of cattle to over 1,000. They built a larger house to accommodate their growing family. Thea gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah in 1885, and then another son they named James in 1887. Owen proved to be as devoted to his daughters as he was to his sons, teaching Sarah to ride almost before she could walk and letting her follow him around the ranch, asking endless questions. James was quieter than his older siblings, more thoughtful, but Owen made sure each child felt equally loved and valued. Thea threw herself into ranch life, managing the household, keeping the books for the ranch operations, and becoming a respected member of the ranching community. She started a small school for the ranch children, teaching them reading, writing, and arithmetic in the mornings before returning to her other duties. When Richard Rowe died peacefully in his sleep in 1891, Martha decided to move to San Francisco to be near her children in their final years. She transferred her remaining 50% of the ranch to Owen and Thea with her blessing. "You two are the children of my heart," Martha said on the day she left, hugging them both tightly. "Take care of this place, make it thrive, and be happy." They did all three. The Double R became one of the most respected ranches in Nevada, known for quality cattle and fair dealing. Owen's reputation grew, and he was eventually elected to the territorial legislature, working to establish fair laws for ranching and agricultural communities. Thea watched her husband grow into a leader and a statesman while never losing sight of what mattered most: family, integrity, and hard work. She watched her children grow tall and strong, each of them learning to love the land that had become their heritage. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Owen surprised Thea with a trip to San Francisco. It was the first time they had left the ranch for more than a day or two since they had married, and they spent a glorious week staying in a hotel, eating in restaurants, and seeing the sights of the big city. On their last night there, as they stood on a pier watching the sun set over the Pacific Ocean, Owen pulled a small box from his pocket. "I never gave you a proper wedding ring, Arya," he said. "We got married so quickly, and I'd spent all my money just to marry you. But I've been saving for a while now, and I wanted to give you this." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond set in the center. It wasn't extravagant, but it was beautiful in its simplicity. "Owen," Thea breathed, "it's lovely." He slipped it onto her finger next to the plain gold band she had worn since their wedding day. 15 years ago, I gave up everything I had for you. It's still the best decision I ever made." "I was so scared that day," Thea admitted, "standing on that auction platform, watching my life fall apart, and then you stepped forward and everything changed." "We changed each other," Owen said, pulling her close. "You made me believe in love, in family, in building something that lasts. You made me a better man." "And you saved me," Thea said simply, "not just from Silas Beck, but from a life without hope. You gave me a future, a family, a love I never thought I'd find." They kissed as the sun sank below the horizon, turning the sky shades of orange and pink and gold. Two people who had started with nothing but necessity and courage, who had built a life together one day at a time, who had turned a business transaction into the greatest love story either of them could have imagined. When they returned to the ranch, they found their children had organized a welcome home party with all the ranch families. Matthew, now 12 years old, stood tall and proud beside his siblings as they rushed forward to greet their parents. "Did you bring us anything from the city?" Sarah asked, always the practical one. "We brought you stories," Owen said, scooping his 8-year-old daughter up in his arms, "and a few small gifts we thought you'd like." That evening, as the party wound down and the children were tucked into bed, Owen and Thea stood on the porch of their home, looking out over the land they now owned outright. Cattle dotted the pastures, horses grazed in the corrals, and smoke rose from the chimneys of ranch hand cabins scattered across the property. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is our life," Thea said softly. "That all of this came from $53 and a leap of faith." "Best $53 I ever spent," Owen said, wrapping his arms around her from behind and resting his chin on top of her head. "Though I'd do it again for free, knowing what I know now." "What do you think would have happened if you hadn't bid on me that day?" Thea asked. It was a question she had pondered occasionally over the years, though she tried not to dwell on it. "I don't like to think about that," Owen said seriously, "but I believe things happen for a reason. I was meant to be in town that day. I was meant to see you and step forward. We were meant to find each other, even if the circumstances weren't ideal." "I'm glad you believe in fate," Thea said, turning in his arms to face him, "because I think you're right. We were meant to be together." The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the milestones of their children's lives. Matthew grew into a fine young man, passionate about ranching and eager to learn everything his father could teach him. Sarah surprised everyone by developing a talent for horse training, able to gentle even the most stubborn animals with patience and skill. James showed an aptitude for numbers and began helping his mother with the ranch books while still in his early teens. In 1895, Matthew left for college in California, wanting to learn modern ranching techniques and business management. It was hard for Owen and Thea to see their oldest child go, but they were proud of his ambition and drive. "He'll come back," Owen said, the day they saw Matthew off on the train. "This land is in his blood just like it's in ours." "I know," Thea said, wiping away tears, "but he's my baby boy, even if he is 18 years old now." Owen pulled her close. "We still have 2 more at home, and Matthew will write. He'll be fine." Matthew did write. Long letters full of enthusiasm about his classes and new friends. And true to Owen's prediction, he came home every summer to work on the ranch, putting his new knowledge into practice. Sarah announced at 16 that she had no interest in marriage and wanted to focus on building a horse breeding program on the ranch. Owen and Thea supported her decision, even though it raised eyebrows in the community. Their daughter was happy and fulfilled, and that was what mattered most to them. James, quieter and more reserved than his siblings, surprised everyone by developing a passion for law. He wanted to become a lawyer and work on issues affecting ranchers and farmers, protecting their rights and interests. "Looks like all our children are going to make their mark on the world," Thea said one evening as she and Owen discussed their youngest son's plans. "They learned from the best," Owen said, kissing her temple. "They learned that hard work, integrity, and love for family are what matter most. The rest is just details." In 1900, Matthew returned to the ranch permanently after finishing his education. He had met a young woman at college, a rancher's daughter from Montana named Elizabeth, and they were engaged to be married. The wedding took place on the Double R in the spring of 1901, a joyous celebration that brought together families from across the territory. Watching Matthew marry Elizabeth, Thea was transported back to her own wedding day nearly 20 years earlier. How different the circumstances had been, and yet how beautiful both unions were in their own ways. She squeezed Owen's hand as they stood together, watching their son pledge his life to his chosen partner. "What are you thinking about?" Owen whispered. "I'm thinking about how far we've come," Thea whispered back, "and how grateful I am for every step of the journey." Their first grandchild, a boy they named Owen after his grandfather, was born in 1902. Watching Owen hold his grandson for the first time, seeing the tears stream down her husband's face as he looked at the tiny baby, Thea felt her heart swell with love so profound it almost hurt. "He's perfect," Owen said, his voice choked with emotion. "Absolutely perfect." "Just like his grandfather," Thea said softly. Sarah eventually did marry, though not until she was 25, to a veterinarian who shared her love of horses. They built a house on the ranch property and continued expanding the horse breeding program that had become Sarah's life's work. James became a successful lawyer in San Francisco, but returned home frequently, always bringing news of legal developments that might affect the ranch. He never married, claiming he was married to his work, but he was a devoted uncle to his nieces and nephews. As Owen and Thea moved into their 50s and then their 60s, they began slowly turning over the day-to-day operations of the ranch to Matthew and Elizabeth. Owen still rode out to check on the herds most days, unable to fully give up the work he loved, but he was content to let the younger generation take the lead. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1912, their children and grandchildren organized a massive celebration at the ranch. Over 100 people attended, testament to the respect and love the Mallory family had earned in the community over 3 decades. As the party wound down and the stars came out, Owen took Thea's hand and led her away from the crowd to their favorite spot on a hill overlooking the ranch. 30 years, Owen said, shaking his head in wonder. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday you were standing on that auction platform. Sometimes it feels like we've been together forever." "Both are true," Thea said, leaning against his shoulder. "We've lived several lifetimes in these 30 years. "Any regrets?" Owen asked. "Not a single one," Thea said firmly. "Every moment, good and bad, has been worth it because I got to live it with you." I was thinking, Owen said slowly, about what I said that day when I bid on you, that $53 was everything I had. I remember. I was wrong, Owen said, turning to face her, his weathered hands cupping her face with the same gentleness he had shown 30 years earlier. $53 wasn't everything I had. You became everything I had. You and our children, our grandchildren, this life we built. That's everything. The money was just the beginning. Thea felt tears sliding down her cheeks, and she didn't bother to wipe them away. You gave me everything too. Hope, love, family, a place to belong. I was nothing when you found me, and you made me into someone I'm proud to be. You were never nothing, Owen said fiercely. You were always strong, always brave, always worthy. I just gave you a safe place to bloom. They stood there in the darkness, holding each other. Two people who had been brought together by desperation and chance, but who had created something beautiful and lasting through choice and commitment. I love you, Thea Mallory, Owen said. I'll love you until my last breath and beyond. I love you too, Owen Mallory, Thea replied. Thank you for spending $53 on me. Best investment either of us ever made. They laughed together, and then walked hand in hand back down the hill toward their home, toward the sounds of their family celebrating, toward the life they had built from nothing but courage and love. The years that followed were gentler, marked by the rhythms of grandchildren growing, the ranch prospering under Matthew's capable management, and Owen and Thea enjoying the fruits of their decades of hard work. They traveled occasionally, visiting James in San Francisco and taking trips to places they had always wanted to see but never had time for when they were younger. But they always returned to the Double R, to the land that had become the foundation of their life together. They spent their days in comfortable companionship, often sitting on the porch in the evenings watching the sunset, holding hands and speaking little because after so many years together, words were often unnecessary. In 1918, Owen fell ill with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. At 64 years old, he fought hard, but his body was worn from decades of hard physical labor. Thea rarely left his bedside, caring for him with the same devotion he had shown her through their marriage. "Don't you dare leave me," she told him one night when his fever was particularly high. "We have so much more living to do together." Owen's hand found hers even in his delirium. "Not going anywhere," he mumbled. "Promise." He kept that promise, recovering slowly but surely as winter gave way to spring. The illness left him weaker than before, and he could no longer ride out with the ranch hands as he once had, but he was alive, and that was what mattered. "You scared me," Thea told him once he was fully recovered, her voice shaking with remembered fear. "Scared myself," Owen admitted, "but I wasn't ready to go. Not yet. I have more sunsets to watch with you." They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary in 1922 with a quiet dinner, just the two of them. Their children and grandchildren had wanted to throw another big party, but Owen and Thea had requested something simpler, more intimate. 40 years, Thea marveled as they sat at their table, the same table Owen had sat at the first night she had cooked for him as his wife. "It's been a lifetime." "The best lifetime I could have asked for," Owen said. "Every single day with you has been a gift, Thea. Even the hard days, the days when the cattle got sick or the prices dropped or the weather was brutal, because we faced all of it together." "I used to think my life ended that day on the auction platform," Thea said softly. "But it actually began. Everything before that was just prologue. My real life, my real story, started when you paid $53 and took a chance on a scared girl you didn't know." "Best $53 ever spent," Owen said with a smile, the same phrase that had become a running joke between them over the years. "Best life ever lived," Thea replied, completing their familiar exchange. They lived 10 more years together, 10 more years of watching their grandchildren grow and have children of their own, 10 more years of seeing the ranch prosper and the family legacy expand, 10 more years of love and companionship, and the deep comfort that comes from sharing a life with someone who knows you completely. Owen passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1932 at the age of 78, with Thea beside him holding his hand just as she had held it so many times over their 50 years together. He simply drifted away between one breath and the next, a gentle departure from a life well lived. Thea grieved deeply, feeling like half of herself had been torn away, but she found comfort in their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, and in the legacy they had built together. The Double R Ranch stood as a testament to what two people could create when they chose love and commitment over fear and self-interest. She lived another 5 years, spending her final years surrounded by family, sharing stories of Owen and their life together, making sure the younger generations understood where they came from and what their grandparents had sacrificed and built for them. On a warm June evening in 1937, Thea died at the age of 80, sitting in her rocking chair on the porch of the home she had shared with Owen, watching the sunset paint the Nevada sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Her great-granddaughter found her there an hour later, a peaceful smile on her face, her hands folded in her lap. At her funeral, Matthew stood before the gathered family and friends and told the story of how his parents had met, of the auction platform and the $53 and the marriage that never should have worked but became legendary in its depth and beauty. "My father used to say that $53 was everything he had," Matthew said, his voice thick with emotion. "But what he bought with that money was worth more than all the cattle, all the land, all the success that came after. He bought a partnership, a love, a family. He bought everything that matters. And my mother," he continued, who stood on that platform believing her life was over, found instead that it was just beginning. She turned what could have been a tragedy into a triumph. She took a transaction and transformed it into a love story for the ages. The family buried Thea next to Owen on a hillside overlooking the ranch, where they could watch forever over the land they had loved and the family they had created. The headstone was simple: Owen and Thea Mallory. Together they built an empire of love. The Double R Ranch continued to prosper under their descendants' management, passed down through generations of Mallorys who never forgot the story of how it all began. The tale of the auction bride and the cowboy who spent everything he had became family legend, told and retold to each new generation as an example of courage, love, and the power of choosing kindness even when it costs everything. And on summer evenings when the Nevada sun sets over the ranch and the sky blazes with color, people sometimes claim they can see two figures standing on the hillside, hand in hand, watching over the land and the family they created together from nothing but $53 and the courage to believe in love. The story of Owen and Thea Mallory was one of transformation and redemption, of two people who met in the worst circumstances and created the best possible life. It was a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the most unlikely beginnings, and that love, real love, isn't about grand gestures or perfect circumstances. It's about choosing each other every single day, working together toward common dreams, and building something lasting from the foundation of mutual respect and deep affection. Their legacy lived on not just in the physical ranch and the financial security they provided their descendants, but in the example they set of what marriage could be when two people committed fully to each other and to building a life together. They proved that it didn't matter how a relationship started, only how the people in it chose to nurture and grow it. The auction platform where Thea had stood in 1882 was long gone, torn down and forgotten by time, but what had been built from that terrible day, the love and family and prosperity that had grown from $53 and a leap of faith that endured, that would always endure, as long as there were Mallorys who remembered where they came from and the incredible journey their ancestors had taken from desperation to joy. In the end, Owen had been right all along. $53 wasn't everything he had, but it bought him everything that mattered. And for Thea, being sold for next to nothing led her to the richest life she could have imagined. Rich not in money, but in love, family, and the profound satisfaction of a life lived fully and well alongside a partner who cherished her until his last breath. Their story became a beacon of hope for others facing difficult circumstances, a reminder that today's darkness could become tomorrow's light, and that sometimes the most unlikely heroes are the ones who step forward when everyone else steps back. Owen Mallory had been that hero for Thea, and she had been his, saving him from a lonely life and giving him the family and love he had always dreamed of but never dared hope he would find. And so the story ended as all the best stories do. Not with perfection, because life is never perfect, but with love, fulfillment, and the knowledge that two people had found in each other everything they needed to build a life of meaning and joy. From an auction platform in Empire City, Nevada, to a hillside grave overlooking a thriving ranch, from $53 to an empire of love, Owen and Thea Mallory's journey was complete. And it was, in every way that mattered, a journey worth taking.